Today we're going to be discussing which is the best evil team in all of Pokemon. Now, Pokemon's had evil teams since Generation 1 all the way up till Generation 7. I'm not really counting Team Yell and Team Star in this video, but we are going to be figuring out from Team Rocket to the Aether Foundation which evil team was actually the best. And we're going to be doing this in a couple of different ways. We actually have a few metrics that we're going to go through. 4 of them, in fact. Number 1, evil team goals. How big were their goals, how large scale, and how successful were they at actually achieving their goals in the main storyline. Obviously, this is without the player being involved. Honestly, no evil team is going to actually get their goals done with the player in the way. Second thing we're going to be looking at is aura. How do these teams present themselves and how iconic are they? And by this I'm talking. And the last thing we're going to be looking at is the impact on the story. Was what they were doing actually impactful on the story? Are they a complete side quest, or do they involve the main story at all? And with all of those scores, we're going to find out which evil team actually is the best in all of Pokemon. So let's dive into it, but before we get into that, make sure you drop a like if you like this video and you want more content like this, and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Without further ado, let's get started, starting with the OG team, Team Rocket. And let's start with their goals, right? Now, Team Rocket had a successful criminal enterprise. They were running an illegal Pokemon business through Celadon. They didn't have any huge world-ending goals, but they are pretty good at what they do, running a criminal empire through most of Kanto. They've infiltrated a large part of Kanto's infrastructure, including its gym challenge. For that, and because of the fact that their goals are not that large in scope, I'm going to give them 7 out of 10 for their goals. Next, we get on to Aura. And the Team Rocket grunts are basically gangsters. They are present throughout Kanto, and without you getting involved, they're actually pretty successful at theft, Pokemon smuggling, embezzling, and large-scale invasions of, key places. So in terms of aura for the grunts, I'm gonna give them an 8 out of 10. The grunts themselves were actually fairly intimidating, mostly in Generation 1. Generation 3 was a little bit of a drop, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and make it the Generation 1 Team Rockets. Then we get to leadership, and Giovanni was the first team leader, and he was iconic, right? He's got great presence, he knows what he wants, he's pretty intimidating, and he even presents your final pre-league threat. He is the last boss you have to face before you take on the Pokemon League. He runs his organization well, he's got clear ambitions, he knows what he wants to do with his organization, and he is a boss in every sense of the word. Looking at Johto Team Rocket, they are basically the leftover leaders, but Archer and Ariana do a fairly good job. They are memorable characters in their own right, and they do a good-ish job of playing final bosses in Giovanni's absence. So in terms of leadership, Team Rocket gets an 8 out of 10 from me, would be a 9 or a 10 if Giovanni was always leader, drops a little bit because of having the others there, but honestly I can't give Giovanni himself less than an 8. Lastly, we have Team Rocket's impact on the story. They do a fair bit to hamper your story progression, being the reason that you have to clear Lavender Tower and Silphco, preventing you from getting into the Psychic Gym because of their takeover of Saffron City. And the biggest impact they have is the fact that the leader of Team Rocket is the leader of the 8th Gym. They have infiltrated so far into Kanto that Giovanni's cover story is that he is a literal gym leader. He is the last challenge you face before you take on the Pokemon League. And for that, I give Team Rocket's impact a 7 out of 10. Not huge impact in terms of like world-ending events and things like that, but they are really good at what they do, and they wrap up the main story nicely going into your final challenge, which gives them a total of 30 out of 40. 75%, not bad. But let's get on to the next team. We're going to be looking at Teams Magma and Aqua at once. So next we get on to Teams Magma and Aqua, which did 2 things differently than previous regions and kind of set the tone for evil teams going forward in Pokemon. First of all, they were the first evil teams to directly use the legendary Pokemon in the Pokemon game, being the evil team working with the legendary Pokemon to progress the game. That trend continued all the way through to Generation 7, and in fact, Generation 3 had something unique on its own. It had 2 evil teams. Every other generation has 1 evil team doing 2 different things across the 2 versions, except for Gen 9 where you've got 2 Pokemon Professors, but I can't really count them as an evil team, so Team Magma and Aqua keep that title for themselves. Looking at their goals, they have pretty clearly defined goals. Team Magma wants to expand the land for people, Team Aqua wants to expand the sea for Pokemon, and they have a clear plan to carry it out. they know where the legendaries are, they know how to unlock the seals on the legendaries, and they know what these legendary Pokemon can do. They are not prepared for how powerful these legendary Pokemon are, and they would have ended up causing the end of the world if the player didn't stop them. Also, they used the wrong orb in the original Hoenn games, so in terms of executing their plan, they executed it pretty well. Give them an 8 out of 10 for execution, but the idea behind their plan, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10. They didn't actually think that all the way through, so for their goals, they get a 6 out of 10. Moving on to the order of teams Magma and Aqua, and I'm going to rank them together, right? They have cool outfits, they have access to lots of tech, and I do like their admins, even though we don't really see them that much. But just talking about the grunts themselves, they are a well put together team. The grunts are a little dumb, but their outfits actually make them stand out, and the fact that they are two different teams, two different designs, and that both teams end up taking roles in the Gen 3 games, means that I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10 for order. They did really well with these teams. Moving on to leadership, well, Maxie and Archie are great leaders. They are iconic, they have fleshed out personalities, they know what they want, and their goals are clearly defined. They have multiple step plans that they put into place, and that even account for failures caused by the player. They have multi-layers of things that they are going to do if they fail to make them end up achieving their goals. They do lose points though in the leadership category for not planning well enough to control their respective legendaries, so you never actually fight them using the legendary, and they are kind of standing there waiting for you to deal with it. So I'll give them a 7 out of 10 for that, because they were iconic team leaders, kind of let down by their own lack of planning. Lastly, impact on the story. Teams Magma and Aqua get points because they are the first evil team to invoke the box art legends as part of the main story. They also have a clear progression through the story, directly responsible for you encountering and maybe catching the legendary Pokemon, and are the first ones to really tie into the story itself and your story progression. So for that, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10, giving Team Magma a total of 28 out of 40. Not quite as high as Team Rocket, but doing pretty well. Next we get on Team Galactic, and honestly they had really well defined goals. They planned to control the legendary Pokemon of either time, space, or both, depending on the version, and use their power to create an entirely new universe. Just because the grunts didn't actually know what Cyrus's whole plan was, doesn't take away from the fact that his plan was pretty amazing. They even used the Lake Guardians themselves to craft the red chain, and if not for the player getting involved, they would have been unstoppable, because the red chain wouldn't have shattered, the Lake Guardians wouldn't have been freed, and they would have actually created a new universe. Except for Platinum, you know, where Giratina gets involved, but when we don't have Giratina, we have the player. So for goals, I'm giving Team Galactic 9 out of 10. Then we get to Order though, and have you seen Team Galactic's grunts? They are so goofy. Their haircuts, their uniforms, their poses, the entire thing just looks ridiculous. I can never find the grunts quite threatening, so in fact, Team Galactic gets an order score of 4 out of 10 because they just look so dumb. Then, however, we must talk about Team Galactic's leadership. And for the first time, you have multiple people in the same game being actually iconic. Anyone who's played through Gen 4 knows that Mars and Jupiter are iconic fights, especially when you're playing through Platinum. That Perugly, that Skuntank, those are genuine threats. If you're doing a Nuzlocke of these games, those are fights you actually have to prepare for because their aces are just so strong. Talking about Cyrus, he's got a really defined thing of just, you know, having a good plan, being really inspiring to his entire fleet of troops, getting them to actually partake in what they think is creating a new universe for them, and he's a total sociopath. The man managed to fool all his followers into creating a new universe for him alone. For that, I give Team Galactic's leadership a 9 out of 10. In terms of impact, their goals, I mean, can you really get bigger than destroying the whole universe and creating a new one? Their entire thing was, they set off bombs across multiple places, bombed the lakes, they kidnapped people, took over buildings, got the legendary Pokemon under their control. In fact, Team Galactic got 4 legendary Pokemon under their control because they captured the 3 Lake Guardians and then took the legendary Pokemon under their control. Well, 5 if you count Platinum, because they had both Dialga and Palkia under their control. For that, I gotta give them an impact of 10 out of 10, because if you weren't there as a player, they were winning. They were destroying the entire universe, and you can't get much more impactful than that. So their total score comes to 32 out of 40. They lose a lot of points for their order, but everything else was pretty bloody amazing. Now we come to Generation 5, and one of the best, if not the best, evil team Pokemon has ever created in the mainline games. And of course, we're talking about Team Plasma. Their goals were amazing. They couched it as Pokemon liberation, letting people think that Pokemon were being abused by simply being with trainers. So they were trying to convince people to liberate their Pokemon, free all their Pokemon, and have Team Plasma be the only ones with Pokemon so that they could take over by force. Their plan wasn't about domination by simply using power. They did that in the end, but their grassroots thing was about actually getting people to think about releasing their Pokemon to get rid of all the threats to them. That is actually pretty well done. Like, it's a well thought out plan. In the background, they were doing all sorts of other things, like capturing the legendaries, having N and Getsus do their thing, building an entire castle underneath the Elite Four. For their goals, they get a 9 out of 10 as well. In terms of order, I didn't really like their uniforms, and the grunts, while more threatening than Team Galactic, were not quite on the level of Team Rocket or Team Magma and Aqua. It just felt like, I don't know, there was something missing for the grunts for me. They were, looking medieval and doing their things, but they didn't actually appear super threatening. So for order, they get a 6 out of 10. Moving on to the leadership. Team Plasma's leadership was just absolutely phenomenal. Not only do you have N, the king of Team Plasma, in inverted commas of course, you have Getsus, whose plan includes using N as a figurehead because he knows he's more palatable than Getsus himself, and the 7 sages, who do the things in the background and eventually take over when Getsus is defeated. I'm talking about Zinzalin here, but the 7 sages are also a key part of Team Plasma. So the fact that their leadership works together this well, is cohesive, and actually has plans upon plans, I gotta give them a 10 out of 10 for leadership. I can't give them anything else. Lastly, we get to Team Plasma's impact on the story, and this is where they take it up to a level that even Team Galactic couldn't. Team Plasma does all the normal villain things, kidnapping Pokemon, taking over buildings, all those sorts of things, but in the end of the story is where things really come to a head. Because for the first time, you face an Elite Four, but not the champion as part of the main story. Because the champion, Alder, has already been defeated by the time you get to him. He lost to N. And so your final challenge of the main game is not the Pokemon League champion. Well, technically it is, but you know what I mean. It's not the champion that you've been promised throughout the game. It is, in fact, the evil team. And once you beat N, your final challenge is Getsus. He is literally your last challenge of the main game. In terms of impact on the story, they are the reason that you get Reshiram or Zekrom. They are the reason that N has Zekrom. They are the reason that the Elite Four is taken down, and that the Relic Castle takes over the Elite Four building. You can't get much more impactful than that. So I gotta give them a 10 out of 10, which gives Team Plasma the highest score so far at 36 out of 40. That is a 90% impact rate for Team Plasma, and that is ridiculously high for an evil team. Unfortunately, that's where things start to go downhill, so, well, let's talk about Team Flare. So when we're talking about Team Flare, I feel like the point that I've got to make is that they actually lose points for very specific things. In terms of their goals were not that bad. The plan was to revive the ultimate weapon by getting energy, Pokeballs, everything that they needed to make themselves strong enough to be able to do these things. To use the legendary Pokemon, revive the ultimate weapon, and destroy everyone that was not a part of Team Flare. And to be honest, they almost pulled it off. Again, without the player's impact of removing the legendary Pokemon, and again, we can't really count the player because the player goes up against whatever threat is required to be beaten and beats them. So Team Flare was actually doing a really good job because, to be honest, everyone else in the Kalos region, unlike Unova, is absolutely useless and doesn't get involved. So for goals, Team Flare gets an 8 out of 10 for me. But then it starts to go downhill. In terms of aura, have you seen these guys? Have you seen what they look like, what they act like, and what they do? There is no threatening vibe to them. They are just annoying orange punks. And I'm going to give them a 2 out of 10 because they don't deserve any better than that. Leadership. Guys, we saw Mabel in the reveal of Legend ZA, right? Now working there. That was the time when I learned that her name was Mabel and that she was actually one of the Team Flare admins. I didn't remember them. I just remembered the weird people with goggles, one with blue, one with green hair, because they were utterly forgettable. They existed, they didn't do anything, they lost the fight, and they weren't even particularly challenging. come on, they didn't do much at all. Lysander, they tried to paint him as the sort of narcissistic, ego-complex hero, feeling bad about what he's doing, but needs to do it. No, it fell flat. Lysander was just supposed to be this twist villain that didn't do much twisting at all because he was just, you know, evil from the start and kind of seemed like a bad guy. So for leadership of Team Flare, I gotta give them a 4. For impact though, I've gotta give them some credit. They did manage to capture a legendary Pokemon, even though it was technically dormant, so they didn't have to battle or do anything to it. They had the legendary Pokemon with them, give them some credit. They managed to revive the ancient weapon. They managed to fire it even without all the energy of the legendary Pokemon. And they did destroy a town. They would have destroyed the world if you hadn't stopped them. And again, like I said, you're the player, you're gonna stop them. Kinda can't judge them too harshly for that. So I'll give them a 7 out of 10 in terms of their impact on the story. But again, they didn't do much to actually influence the main storyline. They were just sort of there. There was no tie-in with the end of the game or anything like that. So I can't give them higher than a 7 no matter how good their plan actually was and how close they came to pulling it off. So for their total, it's actually the lowest one we've seen so far. They get a total of 21 out of 40. They barely got a passing grade, which is disappointing, but explains why no one really likes Team Flare and why I'm hoping Legends ZA does a better job with antagonists than the original Carlos games. But lastly, we gotta talk about the last evil team. I don't think I can call any team after Gen 7 evil team, and this is the combination of Team Skull and the Ether Foundation. So let's talk about them. If Team Flare were not intimidating, Team Skull kind of took that to a new level. They presented themselves as people trying to be intimidating with their whole poses and moves and everything like that, and just utterly failing. So they almost presented themselves as a bad evil team, which turned out to be a pretty good misdirect when you find out that the Ether Foundation were the actual villains. But even then, the Ether Foundation weren't really, you know, that impactful. So let's break it down. So in terms of the scores, we're going to be talking about the Ether Foundation in terms of goals, impact, all those sorts of things, because honestly, Team Skull are just a front for the goals of the Ether Foundation. So let's talk about that. The Ether Foundation's goals are kind of different across the two games. In Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, I kind of get it. They are trying to use Solgaleo or Lunala's power to prevent Necrozma from taking over the world and stealing our light. You know, fair enough. In the Sun and Moon games though, Lucamine's whole thing is that she wants to merge herself with Nihilego to get to the bottom of what happened to her husband, and she's just generally insane. I don't quite know what Lucamine's actual goals are in Sun and Moon, to be honest, like besides turning herself into an evil jellyfish type monster. Like, I get that she's a villain, but it's not a very well thought out plan. So in terms of goals, I kind of got to give her a 6 out of 10. It doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. Like, feel free to tell me in the comments if I'm wrong or if I'm missing something, or if you think her plan was actually good and I'm just misinterpreting it, but it really didn't feel like there was much behind it. In terms of aura, well, Team Skull has no aura. They are just people wearing tank tops and bandanas. They have no aura. The Ether Foundation employees are just people wearing white with gloves and berets. Cool. Aura for who? No. 3 out of 10. Just 3 out of 10. Slightly better than Team Flare, mainly because they didn't have the annoying orange, but I can't give them higher than a 3. Leadership wise, look, I like Guzma. Guzma is a big part of why I'm giving them this higher rating for leadership. He is a pretty good leader for Team Skull. He is kind of the big brother, and he does present a legitimate challenge. That Goliath part of his is actually insane if you don't know what it does, and if you're playing through for the first time, and you don't know that it has emergency exit, it can be quite threatening. Then in terms of the Ether Foundation's leadership, Lucamine can present a challenge, but she's, I don't know, like I said, she's very inconsistent. Faber's just annoying. And, well, I guess I'll give them a 7 out of 10, mainly because of Guzma and Ultra Sun Lucamine, but I don't really see the leadership doing that much. In terms of impact, well, again, in Sun and Moon, they bring the Ultra Beasts across, which is pretty impactful. In Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, they get Cosmog to evolve into Cosmoem by creating the Ultra Wormhole, and they are pretty much responsible then for you being able to evolve Cosmoem into Solgaleo/Lunala, because otherwise it would still have been a Cosmog. I get that their thing about Necrozma and things like that kind of does some stuff, but they went in there and they disturbed Necrozma in Ultra Megalopolis, so that's kind of on them, you know? I'm gonna give them a 6 out of 10 for impact because I can't justify making it any higher. I just can't. I tried. And with that, Team Skull / Ether Foundation's total is 22 out of 40. It's 1 point higher than Team Flare. We've gone from Team Plasma at 36 to Team Flare at 21, Ether Foundation at 22. That is a huge drop. And then in Gen 8 and Gen 9, we didn't even have any proper evil teams throughout the entire playthrough. I miss evil teams. If you want to know how much, I have a short here about it. I miss having evil teams. But, let me stop my rant. We're talking about which the best evil teams are in all of Pokemon, right? So, in order, we have at the very bottom, Team Flare. Just above them by about an inch or so, we have the Ether Foundation. Above them, we have Team Magma / Team Aqua, because they did it pretty well. They lost some points though for the fact that their goals weren't that well defined and that their plan had some glaring holes in it, but they did pretty well. Tied above them are Team Galactic and Team Rocket, did what they were doing really well, and did a really good job throughout the game. And in first place, by, you know, there was no one to contest them for first place. They were clearly the best evil team. Team Plasma did things really well over Black and White and the sequels Black 2 and White 2, and honestly created a level of iconic villain for Pokemon that we have not seen matched before or since. And I, for one, would really like to see them try and match that, because I really want them to bring back evil teams. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you agree with my ratings? Do you disagree with my ratings? And what sort of videos would you like me to put up next? Thanks everyone. See you next time.